Hey, today we're going to talk about baptism and the remission of sin, sin being sent away. And we're going to learn today about sin and its effects. We're going to learn about different kinds of sin. We're going to learn where sin comes from and what happens when we sin, the consequences of sin. Most importantly, how do we get rid of this? And how does God give us the grace to overcome sin once for all and also as a lifetime journey? So let's get started. So, what is sin? Here you see a really dark kind of image. It's this kind of ghostly looking figure of a girl who's got her laptop on her lap and she's kind of like had enough. She's collapsed with exhaustion. It's a dark, dismal, deadening kind of image of what we might feel when we binge on too much social media or something, or watch too many Netflix, or it might just be a good image of sin. Because sin is that chosen action, any chosen action by which a person effectively places his or her own will before the will of God. Put into a different way, if God is love and God wants only love, wills only love for us, why would we want anything more? But guess what? We do. We think we do. We want more than God gives, and we think we're going to find it, and we look for it in all the wrong places. And so we do all these actions which get us into trouble, get us into this feeling that this girl has, this ghostly girl has here. It just doesn't work. So let's look a little more deeply into this thing called sin. Sin has effects, right? Sin will break up completely or at least harm our relationship with God, with that love who is God, with our love for ourselves, a love for others. So it affects all these areas of life. We know also that sins are not all the same. There are different degrees of sin. You know, if a mafia don murders somebody, it's not the same as maybe cheating on your quiz or taking a pen you find on a table because you don't have one. Doesn't quite work that way, right? Now, sin is sin, selfishness is selfishness, but there are degrees of these things, and it makes sense. So we speak in the church of mortal sin and venial sin. Mortal sin is that sin which totally destroys or wipes out our relationship with God because it is mortal, like mortal combat or a mortal wound. It's deadly. It completely kills it. But then there's sin which doesn't kill it, but it does harm it. It chips away at that relationship and damages it in some way. And we call that venial sin. Okay, so where does sin come from? Why are we in this world where we got to put up with this stuff anyway? Well, we speak of an original sin because, like everything, it has a cause, it has an origin, right? So sin does too. And where does it come from? If human beings are the ones who sin, must come from our first parents. We call this in the Bible Adam and Eve. We give these figures names, and the story represents that first choice of our first parents for sin. Okay, and so this is going to have effects on everything. Original sin means the first sin, but original sin also means that everything afterward is going to have to put up with this fallen world in some way. So it has an effect on us, not because it's a curse, not because God makes us pay for Adam and Eve's sin, but because sinful human beings affect other people, right? And they raise other people who are going to be less than perfect and maybe in some cases really, really bad, right? So it matters, you know, who you are and the effect you have on other people. So what effect does it have? Well, we say it has an effect on our intellect, our thinking, our will, our choosing, and all of this results in a certain tendency to sin, where we have already kind of like a something in us just kind of hankers for it, right? And goes that way. When we're given two choices, we make the selfish one. So our intellect is darkened. We're not thinking clearly. Our will is weakened. We don't have the strength always to choose the right thing. And it ends up in this kind of default situation we call concupiscence, which is this basic tendency to fall and to sin and to make mistakes. So original sin and us. So we're all born into this fallen state. Again, it's not our fault, it's just the way things are. You can't be raised in a situation and it not affect you. So the situation is that humanity has lost its original friendship with God, with love, and has become selfish. And the more it moves on, the more selfish it becomes. And so we're in need of something, right? We have a desperate need for God to intervene, to come in and to save us, to pull us out of this. It's like we're drowning and the people can't swim around us. They can't help us. We're all in this together. We need someone from outside to pull us out and to save us. And this gift we call grace. How do we receive that grace? Well, we believe that we receive it through the cross of Christ. Now, what does that mean? It's not like a magic ticket or something. What that means is that God, who is love, wants to give himself completely to us and for us. That's how much he loves us. But how can God do that? God's infinite. God is inexhaustible. God could keep raining love and it just keeps going. So he can't give his life unless he becomes one of us. And that's what he did. He becomes one of us in Jesus and is able to give his life to the last, to actually die for us, and die for us a terrible death on the cross to show the extent to which he loves us. And so Jesus, the grace Jesus gave us on the cross by showing that love of the Father, that love of God, God gives us through this act, through this ritual of baptism, the sacrament of baptism. And what does that do? It wipes out sin. It cleanses it completely, as we talked about in the last lessons. What sin does it cleanse? All of it. The actual sins we've committed up to that point. So no matter what I've done up to that point, if I'm truly sorry and I truly give my heart to God and am baptized, that just cleanses all that away. But it also cleanses original sin. So even a baby who hasn't done anything wrong, actual sin, is still born into this sinful world and needs to be cleansed with that grace of God. So all of that sin is wiped out in baptism. And so this is really good news for us all. We'll talk about it more next time.